Welcome to Absolutely Not, the live podcast series dedicated to providing examples of setting personal boundaries at work and the vocabulary needed to name harm in those spaces. Hello, welcome back, everybody. We are back with the first episode of 2022. Absolutely not. And the key words for this episode are safety, dismissive, and disabilities. I encourage you all to look into these definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions that you carry with you. If you need help comparing, please let me know and we can work on those definitions together. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with your therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutelynot for more information and to get 10% off your first month. Y'all, I know I have been gone for a while, but today's episode, it's going to be good. I'm so excited. And it's titled, There Will Be No Parade. I know, very hurtful, very hurtful. And that hurtful message is brought to our amazing special guest today, Phil Molé. Phil has been in environmental health and safety EHS industry for 25 years, working as a consultant as well as a global EHS coordinator, where he was directly involved in management of key safety, sustainability, and environmental projects. Yes, Phil. He frequently talks and writes about the intersection of workplace safety and with equity and social justice. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am so excited about this episode. I already touched on how hurtful your title is. Where did that title come from?
That title basically just came from life, life in the business world, and have seen repeatedly that it's true. That a lot of people, I think, assume that by making themselves available all the time, by taking that call on when they're on PTO or when it's after hours, by being involved in meetings when they're supposed to not be working and spending time with their family or their friends or just doing whatever they want to do that's unrelated to work, they think that somehow this is going to manifest in a reward, a parade, literally or figuratively, that it's going to show that they're a team player, that it's going to go a long way with demonstrating to people that they're valuable. But the reality is it's going to probably just mean that instead of enjoying that time and using that time for your personal benefit and for your mental health, that you've given that away, and that there's not going to be a reward for that.
Okay, if I didn't already know that to be true, Phil, I would want to fight you. Like that is so painful to hear. We are conditioned from a very young age to think that we're going to get that parade. Phil, when did you realize that there was no parade?
So I think I've seen it for myself just over the course of many years working, and I've also seen it in terms of what happens when other people, for example, leave a company. I mean, just a couple of examples. Like I've seen actually a few cases where somebody who had been with a company 20, 30 years, they'd worked overtime, they'd been to the meetings, they'd stayed late, going home to their families at 7, 8 o'clock at night. They leave the company, and sometimes there's not even an email that goes out to people indicating that this person even left. There are times I've had to find out that they're gone by asking, oh, what does so-and-so think about it? And I'm told, oh, they left months ago. And, especially now with, I think people working remotely, some people might be finding that things like that are happening, that there are people that are gone that they didn't even know are gone. There might not have even been any kind of announcement about it, and they might not have heard from their supervisors. So it just goes to show that, all of that time that somebody might have spent thinking that they were building up, that everything that they were doing was so important and mattered so much, and that it was going to result in some kind of recognition or the sacrifices that they were being made. In the end, unfortunately, a lot of times they're gone, and their replacement might start 3 weeks later.
If that. You used
Yeah.
a lot of words that are just like cutting me very deeply. And I do this work. Like I understand what you're saying, and it's still cutting me to the core. One of the things you said is giving it away, that you're giving away your power, your agency, your value to an organization who won't even send that email, Phil. Um,
Mhm.
when did you realize, or what was like this the turning point for you that made you think, oh, I have to stop giving it away?
I think that one turning point was honestly some years ago when I've had one of the things that I've done that I think you touched on in your introduction was I've been a consultant. And when you're a consultant, your life is based on your billability. You have to justify your existence every 2 weeks by filling out that timesheet and hopefully being able to demonstrate that my percentage of billability for this particular 2 week period is above what it should be. And they typically want that to be 75%. Well, if you're working through times where there's an economic downturn and not people are not doing the hiring of consultants that they might have when times were better, they have to refocus that money other places. It got harder. So in practice, you wind up working longer hours on things. You're really working on reports, but you can't bill the hours that you're putting to it. So I got to a point where we were underbidding work just to get it. And I was having to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting at this very table where I'm sitting right now, after my kids had gone to bed. And I spent the full day working before that and then tending to my children, one of whom was a newborn baby at the time. And after everybody's in bed and the crying stops and the baby's asleep, I come back to the table, set up the laptop, working until 2 in the morning. And it came to a point where, I think a number of days of doing that, you start to kind of reassess things, and you start to think, what is all of this ultimately going to get me? I mean, I need to have a job, I need to work, but it's not like they're over there thinking, wow, Phil is really sacrificing for us. We really appreciate that Phil is sitting, like if they get up to go to the washroom at night, it's 2 in the morning, they think, yep, Phil's sitting at his table working on a report for us now. What a guy. That didn't happen. So, and it came to the realization that this was not only giving the time away that I could be sleeping and getting ready for another day, and another day being a dad and being a husband, but it also is ruining the other times because I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, I'm in such a bad mood that it's seeping into the other areas of my life, and it's causing me, and I would see myself and feel myself being irritable and losing my temper sometimes when I shouldn't have. And I knew that, this isn't me. This isn't a normal thing for me. So I'd kind of started to think, some of the thoughts that we're talking about right now, that, in the end, I mean, I'm going to still have to be a dad. I'm going to still have to be a husband. I'm going to still have the responsibilities that I need to have. And I need to enjoy my time with the people that actually matter the most to me. When the day comes and I did leave that company, when the day comes that you leave a company, they're probably not going to be thinking of it as a really sad day for them, as a departure that they have to think, that they have to really, that's going to really affect them that deeply. They'll move on. It's going to take you a while to recover from all of that, but they'll move on.
They'll move on. And oh my gosh, there's so many of the things you said, I just am having such a hard time thinking about the times I've done the same thing, 2 a.m. in the morning, and just like, man, this is gonna get me something. Um, I know that you talked about the person going to the washroom and saying, like, yeah, I bet Phil is doing work right now and stuff. And has anyone ever said that to you? Like, we saw that you put in hours at 2 a.m. Has anyone ever said that?
They haven't said it recently because I don't put in hours at 2 a.m. But back at the time, at that job, they never did. No, I mean, and I think that there probably would have been times that they might have figured that out. I might have even sent an email or two for 2 a.m. back at the time. So I'm sure that there was some record or documentation that I'd been working at 2 a.m. But I never heard anything like, "Wow, we really appreciate you working so hard. We know that you've got kids and you've got all these other things that you should be doing." Never heard any of that. No.
And you mentioned it ruining and
Yeah.
seeping into the time with people who are a priority in your life. Did the people
Mhm.
around you, who you talked about, your family, did they notice it as well?
They did. Yeah, I think my wife would have said at the time, and might remember now that, I mean, there were times that I was very irritable, because of the fact that I was working such long hours, and I was also traveling a lot at that time too. And that's part of what that made that job so difficult is, when you're a consultant, you have to a lot of times go physically to a place
Mhm.
to inspect things, to talk to managers of the facility, gather information and documentation. I often had to do a lot of background research on places that I was going to that could only be done locally in the municipality that the places were located. You've got to go to the assessor's office. You've got to go to the city building department to get permits to help you piece together the history of these places. So I was always traveling. I was always going back and forth to airports. And then when I wasn't, I'm trying to make up time sitting here at the table at 2 a.m. getting reports done. And my wife, she understood all of that. Yeah, she knew that I was irritable, but she knew why I was irritable. I mean, she knew that there were very significant reasons for why that was happening. And it wasn't just me being a jerk. There were things happening that were causing that.
Mhm. And I appreciate your supportive wife at that time. I'm glad that you had such a supportive partner with you
Yeah.
go through that time where you didn't have boundaries. Now that you do have boundaries in your professional life, what do those kind of look like? Are there any top boundaries that you're setting currently?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest boundaries is just having a really hard line between work time and personal time. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one. I mean, there's studies that show that a lot of people have actually been feeling the pull of working longer hours during the pandemic if they work jobs that shifted to remote work. Not every job can work remote, can be worked remotely, but those who did shift to remote work found that there was this sort of like professional creep of things happening where they would feel obligated to look at an email, at 7 o'clock at night, or answer an email at 7 o'clock at night. And because of my past experiences, I just have a very firm rule that I don't do that. Now I might look at an email. If I'm sitting at the computer and it pops up, I might say, "Oh, let's see what that says." And it's like, okay, I'm not taking any action on that right now. That's going to wait till tomorrow. So just will not. I will not do that. There's a boundary that I have, and that I think that a lot of people are finding it difficult to maintain. But I've just seen from past experience, I've got to hold that line. I got to keep work and family life in separate spheres.
I love that. I have to hold that line. And I'm getting such a visual. It's like a rope, like somebody else is holding a rope and I'm holding the other end of the rope to make sure this line is here. This line is right here. I don't care who's, I mean, it's probably my support system on the other side who's holding that steadfast line with me. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. I know that you also mentioned your identity as a parent who has a
Yep.
child with disabilities. How has that affected your boundaries in the workplace?
It's I think added further importance to me to make sure that I am maintaining that work life balance, and that I am disconnecting at the end of an actual workday, and spending time with my family, because I have a child, my son, who is about 12 and a half years old right now, has autism. He's nonverbal. He was also born with hearing loss in his right ear, but autism is the main challenge that he has. He has a communication assistive device. He could use it to ask for a few basic one-word requests, but he's unable to care for himself, and he needs a lot of direct assistance from us, and because of that, we need to make sure that he's getting the attention that he needs, the care that he needs. There are times that I might have to take some extra time to make sure that he gets to therapy or somewhere that he needs to go. I have gotten at a point where I'm also less able to travel and do some of the things that I used to be able to do, just because of the age that he's at now. There's a lot of different kinds of support that he needs that I need to be there for. And luckily I work for a company right now that's very understanding of that.
And I am so grateful to you for sharing that with us because, as we talked about before, I don't think a lot of people understand the conditions and needs that come when you are a parent with a child with disabilities.
That's right. I think that there's a tendency, and there's a lot of times, even with very well-meaning people, that they'll talk about milestones in the lives of their kids, and they'll say that, oh, we got this graduation, we're going to, or my daughter or son is starting this new program, they're doing this and that, and there's sometimes an assumption of universality, that everybody is going through the same milestones in the same way, that every parent has got the same issues going on, and that's not the case at all. And so, my advice to anybody that might be a manager of other people is to try to be aware of things like that. It's if you know that you have an employee that has that has a child that does have special needs, just be aware that there's not always going to be people who can take care of the kids in the same way, with the same readiness and availability that somebody else could find a caretaker for, because there are issues that need to be dealt with, and they need much more constant supervision. They need much more constant care, and so those are things that I would hope that employers in 2022, especially, as there is more attention paid to the diversity of the workplace and the different challenges that employees have, that's something that's starting to get on people's radar, at least.
And I will say, from my perspective, I have not heard a conversation talking about the parents that have children with disabilities, even under the umbrella of DEI, that's talked about all the time in the spaces that we see. And I think it's so important because you come with different conditions than the other people on your team. You have to set different boundaries than the other people on your team. Have you seen that recently? Have you had to have those conversations recently?
Yes, yeah, I do. I have to have an occasional conversation about, I think that even when the pandemic started, my son will make a lot. I mean, everybody's kids in the background will make noise sometimes on Zoom calls and Teams meetings, whatever other platforms people use. My son will make a lot of noise, and he'll run around and he'll clap and he'll vocalize a lot, and so it makes it difficult sometimes to participate in these calls. And sometimes if when I do talk, there'll be noise in the background, and I'll have to explain that I can't control that. I can't just tell him don't do that anymore, and he'll say okay, Dad, and go off and do something else. He's going to keep doing what he's going to keep doing. He's sensory seeking is a term that they call it in neurodiverse circles, and there's not much I could do when he's doing it. So, in terms of specific things that I might need to do on certain days, or I might need to be present at an individualized education plan (IEP) meeting, which is, if you're familiar, schools have these for children that students that are at their school that have special needs. Public schools need to provide that service. There are times that I need to be at an IEP meeting, and there are times I'll have to say, hey, this is something that I got to do on this day. And again, but currently, where I work, they're very understanding of that.
I'm so glad that they're very understanding. I know that you may have in the past, though, come in contact with people who are not very understanding. Has that ever occurred?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that job I mentioned before, where I was sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. working on reports, we didn't even know about any of the issues that he was going to have yet. But I just, as a father, took parental leave at the time, and the reaction I think that I got from people at that company when I indicated that I was taking parental leave was kind of like, but you're a man. I mean, why are you taking parental leave? It was like, it's not exactly what they said, but it was the vibe. The vibe was that I was asking for something so unheard of and ridiculous that and it seemed like it might have even been unprecedented in that company that someone would do such a thing as that. And I think, quite frankly, that it affected the way that I was seen the rest of the time at that company.
Okay, Bill, let's unpack that. You said it affected how you were seen the rest of the time you were at that company. And as a safety professional, did you feel safe after that time?
Well, so that job was a consulting job. So, a lot of the time that I worked, I was working on reports. There were times that I needed to go to factories and different facilities and do inspections of them. So there were always risks there, and you need to have safety equipment, minimally safety shoes with the steel toes and safety glasses and stuff. So those kinds of things, and different facilities would have their own safety policies about what you needed. If they didn't have it, they'd provide it. But in general, I mean, in terms of more psychological safety, I had a lot of anxiety at the time that I don't think I even understood until the job was over, until I was gone. And the anxiety was basically just, at any given time, they might just get sick of me being there and, just decide that I shouldn't be there. And that it was certainly that, that I was not going to be considered for any type of promotion or raise because I was not seen as a team player, because I was the kind of employee who, even though he was a man, somehow took time off for parental leave. And that I think that did affect the way that I was perceived from that point on.
Um, I am about to cry because I've heard that scenario time after time. Whenever someone sets a boundary or says that they have different needs than other people in the workplace, then immediately you're like, okay, great, I'm going to lose my job because of the reaction of the people who are in power at that organization. I cannot thank you enough for talking about it, because that is another layer to this. You are another person who is put under the umbrella of does not fit, does not belong, cannot stay
Right.
here, will not be able to move forward in the company. How how does that make
Mhm.
you feel? How does that make you feel? Even when, if you have to look for another job, what does that make you feel like?
I'll tell you honestly, I mean, I came to a point at that job where, like, the final boundary with that job that was kind of trampled over was that I had to take time off. My whole family, including me, was sick. And I had to put in a request for, and this was also right before the holidays of that year. It was specifically the week before Thanksgiving of that year. And I had to put in a time request for a sick day to try to take care of my family as being the least sick of the sick among us. And on the day that I had taken off, I had a BlackBerry at the time, and my BlackBerry around the middle of the day starts getting messages from work asking if I could travel the next week. The next week is Thanksgiving week. And it would be probably a 2-day trip. And with these kinds of trips, you don't even know. I mean, flights get canceled. Sometimes you have to get connection flights to get to where you're going. You missed that connection flight or the connection flight's canceled, everything is out of whack and you might not get back. So there was a chance I might not have even been able to get back before Thanksgiving, aside from the whole issue that I was sick and that my family was sick and they're still trying to get me on that plane. So I was fortunate to, have been in a position where I had the ability to go in that Monday and basically say, that's it for me. And I had the discussion with my wife first, of course. We decided that between the two of us, within the resources that we had been able to save over the years, that we were gonna take the chance because my being there was making me sick, literally. I mean, it was worrying me in terms of the anxiety about the uncertainty of not knowing when another boundary was going to be crossed, when another call was going to come in, when another text message was going to come in, when I was going to have to, they were going to try to put me on another trip to someplace, even though they knew very well the difficulties and the challenges that I was having at the time. And it came to a point where, it was just like a weight being lifted off my shoulders when I realized that I can't do it anymore. And I'm going to tell them that I'm not. And it was quite satisfying to do that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the pieces of the puzzle that you just created with us is the consistently crossing boundaries, the knowing of your conditions and not giving a shit. Like as soon as that gets pieced together, then you see the whole picture. I'm like, wow, this place is awful. I can no longer stay here and be psychologically safe or be whole or
Yeah.
be mentally healthy. It just won't work.
Mhm.
Ooh, I do want to read this
Right.
comment that somebody had in the chat. Quebec and Canada sucks in many ways, but paternal leave was introduced to allow the parent not taking the 1 year paternal leave to also be paid and paid for it. I believe it is 5 weeks. It is something that not everyone takes advantage of, but has become prevalent over the past several years. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think
Mhm.
moves and changes in policy like that don't happen unless people like you, Phil,
Right.
start setting boundaries and having these
Right.
conversations. Was
Yeah.
there anybody else in your organization that identified as a parent with disabilities that you could think of over your long career?
There's only one other parent that I have worked with personally. I mean, being a special needs parent, we know of other people, who are in the same position, but they're basically parents of the children that our child goes to school with. I've only personally worked with one person that I know for sure has a child with special needs as well. Um, and again, and I think that part of it is that uh, there may have been others, but I think that people are conditioned to not want to talk about it. I think that because of a lot of the things that we've talked about here today, they don't want to be difficult. Like a term that sometimes people use is that the ideal employee is the frictionless employee. It's like you don't want to be the employee that creates friction. That is like if you feel like you're creating friction, then you feel, and sometimes justifiably, that you're not going to be seen as the team player. You're not going to be the one who's considered for new roles going forward. You're not going to be seen as having the same kind of future perhaps at the company that somebody who is frictionless might have.
That is that. Oh my gosh, the word frictionless. You know how friction filled I am, or how how freaking frictional I am. Like, wow, that is something. And how much friction I can cause on a daily basis based on the biases that the people in power at organizations have. Like, just me being alive or existing causes friction, and that's hard for people to carry with them into organizations. Just you having a child that has different needs than other children causes, like, that's so wild. That is
Mhm.
just, Oh, okay. I will process that in my own time. Thank you so much, Phil, for everything you have shared today. For the people out there that have to cause friction in order to be whole, that have to cause friction in order to be sane, that have to cause friction in order to feel psychologically safe. What would you say to them about being fearful to cause that friction?
I would say that sometimes it just comes down to a choice of causing the friction or losing whatever mental health that you might still have. And that's the choice that I found that I've been put in. I've been given that a couple of times, whether they intended that or not. I'm sure they didn't because, but it doesn't matter whether they did or not. I mean, I think it's the culture that we have today. It's the grind, the culture of just the hustle culture, that you're just supposed to be working, you're supposed to be on all the time. And, a word that you sometimes see used a lot today is grit. Grit is something that a lot of people are supposed to have, but maybe not everybody can have it. Not everybody might be wired to be a person that is gritty, that has enough grit to impress the people that they work with. There are TED Talks about it. There's all kinds of fine words said about grit. But at the end of the day, I think, what grit is really another example of is just the idea that you can't ever really refuse to do something. And if you try to make space for yourself, then you're going to be seen as causing friction. If you try to say, wait a minute, that's too much work on my plate right now, that's causing friction. If you try to say, well, I just need a day off, but there's a lot of stuff going on at work, that might cause friction. So what I think the best spin on grit that people put out there is that, oh, person's got to be resourceful, they've got to be resilient, all well and good. Not everybody's as resilient as everybody else is. Not everybody has the circumstances and the life background that could give them the same level of resilience that everybody else has. And sometimes all of this talk about resilience is just a cover for dumping a lot of things onto the employee and hoping that they're not going to complain about it.
Philip Molé. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. And do you know what? Anytime I see the word grit, nobody like me is attached to it. Like, no, it's always like certain types of people. This person has so much grit. Okay, we will also unpack that on our own time, but thank you so much for adding another word to our toolbox to look out for, because I can't even define grit. I don't know
what you just said, I think, is a very good point, because the people that are assessing how much and whether you have enough of it often are only familiar with the way that people in their own background and other people that share their identity and their own similar kinds of life experiences. That's their model for having grit. But what if they don't know anything about and aren't curious about what other people are going through? Whether it's somebody like me that is a parent of a special needs kid, whether it is somebody from a marginalized identity, somebody that might have disabilities, they will not see that as grit. They just see that as unfortunate. They see that as just, well, of course they have to deal with that because those are the challenges they have. But they might not give you any credit for having dealt with them. It might just be that, well, we're going to recognize in some level that person might have some difficulties, but we're going to still give the promotion to this guy over here, because we understand he has grit in a way that I recognize, in a way that I've seen on the TED Talks, that you deal with the normal problems, the normal challenges, and you don't have to do it while having the types of challenges that other people have.
Wow, this has been a painful ass episode. Like painful in the sense that I'm just like, wow, these people need to do better. Like the TED Talk people, the people who are assessing, the people who are making up these cool ass words for us to all feel resilient and that this adversity is cool and we were able to make it on the mountaintop. Y'all need to get it together because, oh man, that was painful. That was painful to hear because it's so true. So very, very true. Every single day you'll see on social media, you see on everything. They're just talking about how easy it is to just hustle and grind and just get to
Right.
the top. Like, why can't you do it? I did it. This person also did it.
Yeah.
That
Right.
person is not me. That
Right.
person is not Phil. That person is not, oh, so many different conditions and layers that people come with. And I thank you so much for breaking it down for everyone today. One of the last topics I did want to talk to you about is the fake state of emergency.
Yeah.
Bill, could you kind of dive into that fake state of emergency that we kind of talked about earlier?
Yeah, you and I, the first time that we kind of talked about how everything can kind of become an emergency in some business environments. That is like, well, we got to have this emergency. We have this emergency that this has got to be done right now. We got this email that's got to go out now. Now, a lot of these emergencies, so-called emergencies, are the result of bad planning, and that somebody hasn't foreseen the need to do something, and because of that, now other people have got to step in and do things and address things that should have been anticipated and done before. And so it will fall on other people to be that person who addresses the pseudo emergency. And so the thing is that, some people might have the experience of working in a culture where everything becomes an emergency. And you can't work in an environment for that long without it becoming toxic and very detrimental to your mental health. Because if everything's an emergency, then nothing is. It reminds me of that Otis Redding song, Dock of the Bay. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll just remain the same.
Phil ended the episode with a song lyric. I love it. I love it. But there are probably going to be so many people that are listening to this and that gear is going to click and be like, wow, I have been working in a state of emergency since I onboarded into this organization, since I got here. Phil, what would be the top 3 tips you would share with them about that fake state of emergency and how they need to set boundaries around that?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing is to realize again that setting boundaries is a must. That like the name of this talk indicates, will be no parade. You're not going to get any kind of a special recognition for answering the calls at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, for responding to emails at 2 in the morning. Just not going to happen. So put your mental health first, put the welfare of yourself and your family first, and your ability to be a friend and to be there for the people in your life that actually matter. The other thing is to not be afraid to have conversations with other people at work that might be going through something similar, because within toxic work environments, you can sometimes have these little pockets of people that are there for each other and support each other. And sometimes you actually have that more in a toxic work environment, because it's almost evolutionary adaptation, right? You got to do something to try to take the edge off, to share and commiserate with other people who are going through the same thing. So don't be afraid to talk about it. And when you talk about it and you find that things are not just you're not the problem. It's not just you being a friction causing employee, then you could potentially have more leverage to do something about it.
Well, damn, those are really good tips. I cannot thank you enough for breaking it down for everyone. To anybody in the audience that could be listening to this, I hope that tomorrow when you clock in, you cause friction. That's what I hope for you. I hope it. I hope that you go to the next person and just cause so much friction and just be your full self and try to be as safe as possible. If that place is not toxic, but you need the money or the paycheck, create a safe bubble for yourself. Like, create that safe bubble until, like Phil said, you have the resources and you have the help that you need to move away from that environment. Excuse me. But Phil, thank you so much for your time today. This has been the first episode of 2022 for Absolutely Not. And I can't thank you enough for being an amazing special guest.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Is there any last minute sprinkles that you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Well, when you were talking about friction, it came to me that friction causes heat, but heat causes light. So there you go. So sometimes when you cause friction, you illuminate things.
Damn, Phil, you just be like, what? Just like, that was a gem. I love that so much. Everyone, go cause friction, cause people to see the light, cause yourself to see the light, and move forward accordingly. Thanks everyone for showing up, and we'll see you next time on Absolutely Not. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Absolutely Not. Your support means the world to me. You can always further support the show by leaving a review or visiting the Support the Mission page on my website, www.katrinastroll.com. My website is also where you can register for upcoming live episodes, watch amazing past episodes of Absolutely Not, and buy Absolutely Not merch. Yay! Until next time, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. See you next time.